The Spanish Grand Prix tends to have a reputation for being a little boring. But at least this race this time round had some other elements to it. There was the temperatures, there was the track surface, there was strategy, there was a technical directive that had just come in, and all of this before we addressed the rather large Dutch elephant in the room. I think it was the 1999 Spanish Grand Prix where just one overtake was reported. The now defunct F1 Reject site wrote an article back in 2008 asking if the Circuit de Catalunya was the most boring track ever, with the 2000 race being mostly decided on pit stop strategy. Well, most races back then were decided on strategy, so maybe there is a point in favour of the track here. This myth of there being so much more overtaking back in the day is exactly that. A myth. Perhaps it's because the teams are too used to the circuit. They don't test much there anymore, with testing now being held at Bahrain since the weather is just, well, more predictable. But it's a track that the teams loved to test at back in the olden days. A few days at Barcelona, then some high downforce testing at Jerez, maybe another test at Estoril, and so on. But it seems that in the ground effect era, actual on-track action at this particular circuit has improved. But then again, stats don't always tell the full story. This edition of the Spanish Grand Prix, like I mentioned, there was a lot to talk about going into it. Members of the Red Bull subreddit, which I've never been on nor follow but seem to get several notifications a day about, were full of hopium that Technical Directive 18, the thing that was to ban McLaren's infamous Flexi Wings TM, would bring the field closer together, and that the illegal rocket ships that they were running would be neutered, and Max would get some more wins. This being despite Max himself thinking that the Technical Directive wouldn't do much. Rob Marshall at McLaren said when asked if they would have to mitigate the losses, "What losses?" These people obviously know a lot more than us, although the response from Marshall was quite savage. Not gonna lie. So what did the FIA do? Well, they've essentially tightened up how much the wings can flex when the cars are out on track. The rear wing flexing was tightened up for the start of the season, but the teams were given until this weekend to fix the flexing at the front, or last weekend, depending on how you look at it. Previously, the flex tests were done by putting 100 kilos of weight on both sides of the wings, and if it flexed less than 15mm, the car was legal. When put on just one side, they were allowed up to 20mm of flex. Now they've tightened all that up. The rules now say that when the same 100 kilo either side is applied, it can now only flex 10mm, while the one-sided test can be 15mm. So they've brought it down by 5mm. Now that's maths I can actually do. No, really, I'm utterly terrible at maths. Long-time viewers will know this. When I'm watching 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown, whenever the numbers round comes up, if there's no 10 or 100 in the available numbers you're allowed to use, I just check out. Dividing by 10 and multiplying by 10 or even 100 is so much easier, and it's why the world would be a happier place if we all used the metric system. There is one more thing to the front wing deflection tests. The front wing flaps are also tested, and the flex allowed when 6 kilos of load applied can't be more than 3mm, down from 5. So it makes you wonder just how much these things bend when they're travelling at top speed with all that air rushing over. There was also the tyres to consider. Pirelli was going to be bringing softer rubber compared to last year, and it was going to open up the strategy element because of how hot the track was going to be. Pirelli, like they had done at Monaco, went one stage softer on the tyres compared to last year. With Barcelona having an abrasive surface that was going to be quite hot, the plan was to force a two-stop race, and has been something that Pirelli has been trying to do all year. But it's only really worked so far at Bahrain, which is the only round of the season where two stoppers have happened without some kind of outside help, like weather or safety cars. Monaco excluded because that was, a rule. But on top of this, the teams found that the hard tyre was a total no-go. They just could not get it to work, and it meant that saving rubber was going to be the way to go. With Leclerc only doing one run in the final qualifying session to save the tyres a bit, and all the cars in the top 10 started the race on used softs, except the two McLarens who had brand new softs available to them, because they're just much easier on rubber compared to the other teams. The problem with the Barcelona circuit is that you need to save rubber while still having the grip through turn 3. Too much downforce and you have the grip, but you cook the rears at other parts of the track. Conversely, you take some downforce off to save the rears and you nuke that front left through turn 3 and it's buggered after 3 laps. Getting that balance was doable on the soft and the mediums, but virtually impossible on the hards. And if you're in a Red Bull that's got an incredibly narrow setup window, even narrower than those slits that they used to put on medieval castles to stop the arrows coming in, you're going to have a very bad time. But that said, Max managed to get a better reaction off the line compared to Norris in second place, and was able to overtake him into turn 1. After a couple of laps he was in DRS range of Oscar, but after that the softs died off a bit. Lando, on fresher tyres, was able to get back past the Red Bull later on, while Oscar, the cold Palmer of Formula 1, managed to pace up at the front. The Red Bull wasn't going to be able to outpace the McLarens, so it might be able to out-strategize them, something that Red Bull is usually quite good at. Max pitting on lap 13 or lap 14 or so for another set of softs was commitment to the 3-stop strategy. It was a gamble that didn't really go the way he would have wanted, because when he made his final scheduled stop on lap 47, the McLarens came in over the next 2 laps. Lando on 48, Oscar on 49. There was now no advantage to be gained, since the 2 McLarens had 1 to 2 laps of a tyre advantage, and they were still in front, with no reason to stop again. There was no undercut, no time gain, nothing. But then the safety car was called late on because Antonelli's Mercedes had blown up, the second Mercedes engine failure in as many races. So with the safety car coming out, the strategies were thrown into disarray a little bit. Oscar and Lando pitted and they managed to do a double stack to take a set of used tyres each, which was going to easily take them to the end with how easy they are on their tyres. But when Max came in, he was put onto the one set of tyres that nobody wanted to be on. The hards. Lambiase said it was because it was the only fresh set they had, and with the hards being so, well, hard to bring into the operating window, it was a baffling decision. This is Ferrari levels of getting things messed up, but it brings into things the question of what Red Bull should have done in that situation. I guess they did it because the McLarens were taking fresher tyres and would therefore have the tyre compound and wear advantage for the remainder of the race. If the McLarens had stayed out, I think Max might have stayed out. If Max had stayed out while the McLarens pitted, it would have been a case of him keeping his nose clean, and if he lost a position to Oscar, he might still keep Lando behind. That is, if Lando burned his tyres out with Max's hards coming into the operating window, so there's that overlap for him to then pull away or at least keep the gap. Max could have turned that third into a second. But as it was, Red Bull had put him onto a set of tyres he definitely didn't want to be on, and that was under normal racing conditions. With the field bunched up after the safety car, he was going to be a sitting duck for not just the first lap after the restart, but for several laps thereafter. And he almost dunked it into a wall on the restart, getting a snap of oversteer on the exit curb. So maybe then it's best to get to the point that you're probably all here for, the final 6 laps, where it properly kicked off. Max's Kansai Drifto out of the final corner was the invitation Leclerc needed to make his move. Leclerc managed to get a run and make the overtake down the straight with the two coming together. Who is to blame for that? I'm not sure. It's a little bit hard to judge. But Leclerc had got the jump, and behind these two was the Mercedes of Russell, who was also sensing an opportunity. So George threw it up the inside with Max doing a bit of squeezing to the apex. George then got a wobble of oversteer, and that caused the Mercedes to hit the Red Bull and force Max off through that Joker lap thing that they have to do to neutralise any advantage gained from cutting turn 1 and or 2. There's one of these at Monza for the second chicane, come to think of it. But the already pissed off Max being on the wrong tyres was now more pissed off that he'd been hit twice by 2 cars by the time he reached turn 1. Now I am willing to give the benefit of the doubt with it all. George did indeed hit Max and biffed him off the road, but Max stayed in front and George didn't gain a lasting advantage. It's the first lap after a safety car, they're on cold tyres, they're pushing, and it's all going to be a bit all over the place. Seeing as they went through turn 3 keeping the positions they had, and Max was only cutting the corner because George put him there, I say just let them get on with it. And the FIA had the same opinion. Whether that's a good thing or not, that's down to you. They mentioned that the reason that Max was there in the escape road is because he was sent there. And because George didn't overtake as a result, they saw no reason to tell Max to give the position back, which is completely fair. Max was sent out there by Russell, don't tell him to give the place back. I agree. Good stewarding. But Red Bull interpreted all of this slightly differently. A couple of laps later, or maybe the next lap, Lambiase's back on the radio telling Max to let George through. Max is quite irate at the whole situation and is asking why, and GP tells him it's the rules, you need to let him back through. So Max lets him back through after turn 4, only to drill George into turn 5. It's one way of sending things into meltdown, isn't it? Comparisons were immediately made to Jerez 1997, where a similar move was made at a Spanish track, but other, more relevant comparisons were made to when Vettel crashed into Lewis at Baku behind the safety car, this being when Seb thought he'd been brake checked, something that some fans still believe to this day, and when he pulled alongside to ask, "What are you doing?" he made contact with the Mercedes. Was it deliberate? It depends on how you see it. It could be standard issue road rage, or it could be that Seb was too busy waving his hands about and not paying attention that he crashed into Lewis. I actually don't know, come to think of it. But where some of this discussion has been made is that Seb did this behind the safety car and got a 10-second stop-go penalty, while Max was given a 10-second post-race penalty, maybe because it happened within the last 3 or 4 laps of the race. Some are suggesting that the penalty should have been 30 seconds applied post-race, as would have been the case in the old days when stop-go penalties were the standard penalty for infractions. Or an outright race ban, if you're Nico Rosberg. And actually, while we're on the subject, Nico's commentary was pretty good to have, given that in terms of people commentating, he's the one with the most recent F1 experience, other than Jolyon Palmer. But unlike Palmer, Rosberg has winner's experience and a championship winner's experience to fall back on, and knows the rulebook pretty well. He said in the moment that Max shouldn't have to give the place back to George, and was way more vocal than any of the other Sky presenters and pundits after the race as to what he thought. Crofty thought that it was Russell that crashed into Max, but Nico was having absolutely none of it. It was on par with that Martin Brundle sass that we used to get when he was on ITV and the BBC. Anthony Davidson was perched well on top of the fence post, and nobody seemed to be willing to say anything other than, "Ooh, that's not a nice thing to do," when it came to the collision. Is it because they're protecting themselves from the inevitable tirade of "Sky Sports are so biased they are literally out to get Max" from the MV1 clan tag people on Twitter? Or is it an order direct from the top? Damon Hill and Johnny Herbert, whatever you think of them as pundits, would have been a lot more vocal. It's just an observation, although answers on a postcard. But you would have to be a massive, and I mean massive, Max Verstappen fan to try and find some way of defending this incident. It was completely unnecessary. Did George hit Max? Yes. Was it aggressive? Yes. Was it George's fault? Yes. Did both drivers continue? Yes. Should Max have drilled him into turn 5 and risked taking them both out of the race? Hell no. Now, there isn't some anti-Max agenda or hating on him or whatever other claims are being made. People are rightly criticising him because he f***ed up. And with the Seb and Lewis thing at Baku, it leads into what has been said in press conferences. I know George mentioned the kids in karting that are looking up to Max, which no doubt many karters will be across Europe, but I'm not sure exactly what he said. Some are saying that George turned into Helen Lovejoy with the "think of the children" thing, while others are saying that he's been taken out of context with it, so I won't offer an opinion on that because I don't know what exactly was said. But anyway, to the point. Just after the Baku collision between Seb and Lewis, there was a karting race at Paul Fletcher International in Newark in England, where a young kid did a full up, and I mean full up, LAPD style pit manoeuvre on another kid, and spun him off the track into the tyre walls at around, 60 miles an hour in those things, and it was done in retaliation to a bit of contact. Now, disclaimer, I am not saying for a second that those two incidents are linked. This is probably the first you've heard about this, and it looks like the footage is no longer available on YouTube. But if the kart punt had been given more publicity after the fact, you would have seen lots of people putting 2 and 2 together. A similar thing with being a role model and an example to the kids happened in V8 supercars about 10 years ago? I've lost track of time, but either way, Shane van Gisbergen used wet grass to overtake somebody on the start-finish straight, and the commentators were going giddy over it, because it was a ballsy move, and I mean a proper, full-on, ballsy move. They were laughing about it and saying this and that and the other and memeing it for a time, but even Mark Scaife, who is a massive SVG fan, said that they need to be careful with this kind of thing and that the stewards will have to stamp it out. Because at some point, some kid in Formula Ford, Super 2 or whatever racing series they have in Australia will try that same thing, stuff the car into a wall, cause a lot of damage to their car and maybe to somebody else's car, and when they're asked why they tried it, they'll say, "Oh yeah, nah, I saw Shane do it at Eastern Creek." I think the reason it's come about is because Max is a 4-time world champion at the top level of motorsport, and he can't be seen to be doing that sort of stuff, especially with clips of it being on YouTube and Twitter within 30 seconds of it happening, because clicky clicky. Under normal circumstances, Max would have probably finished that race in 4th or 5th. In fact, he might have got Charles back later on because Charles and George's tyres were falling off towards the end, and Max, being on the harder tyres, might have been able to get third place back. As it was, he finished 10th. There are people out there with a straight face saying that Max was unfairly penalised for this and that the FIA is out to get him. It's baffling. Now, I fully sympathise with the fact that he was put on the wrong tyres. That would hack anybody off because the rest of the field is going to have a massive advantage over you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Your third place is about to become at least 4th, if not 5th or even 6th, but he might have had the pace to stay at least 4th, I think. I also sympathise with him being annoyed that he was hit by George and he had that coming together with Leclerc. That's going to rile him up even further. But that doesn't mean that you can just drive into somebody else because you are annoyed. Now, admittedly, it's not the worst thing that's ever happened on track in Formula 1, but when you're a 4-time champion and a very, very, very popular driver, there has to be some sort of higher standard that you've got to be held to. Max is a phenomenal, and I mean absolutely phenomenal driver. There's nobody out there, even among the biased British media, that will say otherwise. And credit will always be given when he does something incredible. Brazil, last year for instance, or even 2 weeks ago when he swooped around the outside of Oscar to take the lead and then go on to win at Imola. That is Max Verstappen at his absolute best. But when he gets aggravated and when he gets incredibly annoyed, there's this red mist that descends and he gets unnecessarily aggressive. Hungary, last year for instance, the complete opposite to Brazil. He's a serial winner. He's going to be immensely pissed off when he doesn't win. Think Cristiano Ronaldo, Stephen Hendry, people like that. They only want to win, and winning is the only thing that's good enough. But as Gary Anderson said, yes, Red Bull screwed him with the tyres, but what was he thinking? But Max has since cooled off and admitted that his frustrations had boiled over. He said in an Instagram post, "We had an exciting strategy and good race in Barcelona until the safety car came out. Our tyre choice to the end and some moves after the safety car restart fueled my frustration, leading to a move that was not right and shouldn't have happened. I always give everything out there for the team and emotions can run high. You win some together, you lose some together. See you in Montreal." Although there will be cynics out there although there will be cynics in the comments saying that this is all damage control and a bit of a PR thing. But enough about all that because I've taken up too much of your time with the crash stuff. It completely overshadowed the absolutely brilliant performance that Nico Hulkenberg put in during that race to finish a very well-deserved 5th. Hulk was in 8th during the safety car period, but a set of brand new softs available to him for those final 6 laps meant that he was able to overtake Hadjar and Hamilton on track, which would have got him 6th, but then inherited 5th from Verstappen after his penalty, which is absolutely brilliant going in that absolute tractor of a Sauber. Bortoleto wasn't too far outside of the points either, it has to be said, and Lawson finished just outside of the points as well, despite him hitting nearly every car around him. Meanwhile, Hadjar continues to impress. I don't think he wants that Red Bull seat because he's doing so well in the Toro Rosso or whatever they're called today. Although a lot of clickbait stuff is appearing at the minute saying that Tsunoda is in trouble as well as Horner talking to Ferrari. But I don't know. Either way, Hulkenberg was definitely driver of the day. Or maybe even Hadjar. Either of them are the ones in proper contention, although Max won it because, well, it's the popular vote, isn't it? Actually, while I think about it, Alonso is in contention for driver of the day as well. He was doing some unbelievable overtakes around the outside of turn 3 to get up the field, and he actually ended up scoring his first points of the season. I said in the Imola video that he would get his first points of the season at Barcelona, but unfortunately I don't have the lottery numbers. Sorry. So like I say, it's rare for a Spanish Grand Prix to have so much going on. It had strategy, it had tyre degradation stuff, and it had a final 6-lap melee to cap it all off. Maybe Barcelona isn't such a bad track for racing after all. But next up is the Canadian Grand Prix in a couple of weeks. So what's going to happen in the interim to bait your clicks? I guess anything can happen at this point, can't it? So then, a look at the Spanish Grand Prix and all the things that went on during said Grand Prix. If this thing has made you think things about the thing, then like this thing so I know the thing is a good thing. And for more things from the channel, click the subscribe button thing and ring the bell thing so you never miss out on any thing that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the mad lads over at Patreon that continue to support me at a more personal level, and if you want to help contribute to the picture purchasing piggy bank, there'll be a link to Patreon in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and other bits and bobs you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks if you just want to top up my coffee cup, and there's memberships too if you want to do Patreon without the Patreon and use some funky emojis in the comments. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.